Okay, so part of my therapy with Mivs, Crenshaw involved journaling. She told me to write down what I thought happened, what I saw, how I felt, and of course how it impacted me. Like my perspective was the only thing that mattered, which actually maybe it was. When Crenshaw introduced herself as Crenshaw, I had to raise an eyebrow. Why so formal? She just chuckled and said that in the couples counseling game, Ms. was a form of self-preservation. Apparently, some people, when confronted with uncomfortable truths, will blow up, and there's no way they're going to sit there wondering, what would her husband think? It has to be professional, Miss Crenshaw said with a half-joking smirk. Sounds like a militant lesbian communist, right? She actually said that, and I have to admit, a gentle, refined woman like her couldn't be further from that image. So weird as it was, I did it. I wrote. Why? Well, maybe because I wanted to remember things through my own memory, not through some tabloid headlines. Trust me, it's all cheap entertainment, clickbait. Nobody really sees us as human beings. To them, we're statues put up to be torn down. A meaningless, repetitive cycle in the 21st century media age. Just so we're clear, I'm Ben Blackcloud. Full name is Benjamin, but I hate that name with a passion. Benji is even worse, and the only one who ever calls me that is my former partner. Speaking of partners, that's Jeff Klondike, or Clonkers as people call him. You know, the stage star. The one who makes crowds roar with laughter with his stories. Then shouts Jeff Fra for a yaayye to imitate his mom. You get the picture, Jeff's a character. Right. But to have a show happen, everyone thinks it's all about him, not realizing that I was the one handling all the logistics and management from start to finish. You think Jeff is going to set things up. He shows up 2 hours before the show, walks on stage, tells a few jokes, gets the applause and quietly leaves. Then Jeff goes for a massage, eats a steak, hits some club. Meanwhile, I'm left behind to pack up the stage, make sure everyone is paid, and I'm the last one to leave, turning off the lights. Not to mention the writing. Let me tell you, Jeff doesn't write his own material. Just watch one of his shows, read the end credits. Without me, there's no stage, no laughs, nothing. He's the performer, but I'm the one behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly. And frankly, he knows it. We're partners in everything, but his name is the one on the marquee. And I'm okay with that. But I'm not bitter. I'm not resentful. I know who I am, what my role is. It wasn't the initial plan when I left the reservation to make money, but like the tribe taught me, where the river flows, you follow. That's how things happen, you just go with the flow. For those who don't know, I was born into a Navajo family in the little town of Teek-Nos-Paz, south of the Arizona-Utah border. Town is a bit of a stretch, really just a village. As a kid, all I wanted was to get out of there. My mom was from Chicago, and my dad was a professional Native American, the kind who constantly reminded you of your heritage in every situation. He gave speeches, lived the whole mirror of tradition lifestyle. When he was working, he was all serious with costumes and rituals. When he was at home, he'd be in jeans talking like anyone else. I loved him, but I didn't want my life tied to that. Me. I wanted to be Ben Blackcloud, a successful stage manager, and part of me just happened to be Native American. I respected where I came from, but it wasn't all of me. People always thought I was a woman if they saw me from behind, because of my thick black hair. My eyes are kind of mixed with my white mother, but the hair is pure Navajo, long and thick. So I wasn't stunning, I wasn't ugly, somewhere in between. And that was me, plain and simple. So, reflecting on my story with Jeff, I wrote about what was truly important, what made me. My journey from Teek-Nos-Paz to here, from a Navajo boy leaving his homeland to a stage manager in the big city, was a journey, a winding river I was always silently following. My brother, he's a skilled carpenter. Not just good at framing or construction, he also spends time researching traditional Navajo woodworking techniques. Oh, you didn't know Navajo have their own unique woodworking? We do. It's a bit like the Japanese style, focusing on joints and how to join wood together in the strongest way possible without using a single nail. It's an art, and my brother excels at both. He's married to Jo, an amazing woman, and they have 3 kids. Those little guys are the light of my life whenever I go back home, always eager to hear my stories about faraway places, about famous people, who honestly I've never met in real life. But hey, they listen with fascination, and that's enough. Like I said, I left home as soon as I could. And guess what path I chose? Theater. That's right, I majored in theater at Northwestern University in Chicago. You may not have heard of it, but it's part of a top-tier communications program. They have tons of scholarships, and I was a minority with an artistic passion, so that was pretty much a ticket in. My high school drama teacher knew some folks there, and after a few letters of recommendation, good grades, and an essay about myself that I poured my heart into, boom. Nearly full scholarship, just had to pay for living expenses. Why Chicago instead of LA or New York? Honestly, those places were too crowded and competitive. I wanted to try stand-up comedy, and Chicago has a whole scene of its own, lots of potential. Big names like Second City came out of there. Plus, it was a chance to explore another part of myself, far from home, not tied to the past. Chicago in the early 2000s was amazing. I was Ben there, no one dared call me Benji. I played the mysterious Indian guy, with a stoic expression, and that in tune with Mother Earth vibe. And like Zero Mostel once said, if you've got it, flaunt it, honey. So I flaunted it. I shared an apartment with Monty Tremlow. Trust me, we poked fun at that name plenty of times, and through Monty, I met his cousin Jeff Klondike. During those years, I learned so much about theater. From performance art, improv, to stage management, script writing, acting, and even stage combat. To make a stage fight look dangerous, it has to be genuinely dangerous, and you'd be surprised how much training it takes to get there. Things were going great until I realized something: I wasn't good enough. Yeah, heartbreaking, but it's the truth. And the whole thing came crashing down because of Jeff Klondike. Jeff wasn't part of our crowd. He was an oddity, with his own quirky thing. I heard he did something like delivery or drove a bicycle for mail during the day, cause he usually showed up to gigs on his bike. He'd go on stage, improv, tell jokes, but honestly, he wasn't that good back then. He could catch a punchline and maybe even control an audience, but his material, nothing special. And a lot of annoying umps and ers that made his sets bumpy. I was also exploring myself in the comedy world at the time. I wrote some scripts, put together some tryouts, and even got booked at open mics. Let me tell you, getting up on stage at an open mic is no easy feat. There are so many expectations. You have to be funny, you have to be engaging, and of course you have to be confident. Lacking any of that, and you're going to fail miserably. So many people have tried and quit on their first night because of the pressure. But if you get just one laugh, you're hooked forever, unable to stay away from the stage. Luckily, I got a few laughs and thought, this is it, this is what I want to do. But if anything held me back, it was that I didn't leverage my Navajo side. People expected me to use it as part of my story, but I always wanted to be recognized for my talent, not for where I came from. Maybe if I had incorporated it, I would have been more successful. But hey, it's easy to say that in hindsight, right? Anyway, after Jeff's set, or as he called himself back then, Jeff K., I decided to go up to him and offer some feedback. He didn't take it as well as I thought he would. Monty was sitting there, giving this Buddha smile while Jeff looked at me with a sour expression. Let me guess, you have better material? You do it better. Well, yeah, but I didn't mean to be nasty. I just wanted to give him pointers. My naivete at the time made me think I had the right to do that. Looking back, I'm truly surprised he didn't punch me. Monty, who witnessed the whole thing, just chuckled kindly and said, Jeff, buddy, he didn't mean any harm. Did you, Ben? He just wants to help in his own clumsy way. Monty held his hands up as if he were trying to diffuse the tension. By now, I realized how wrong I was. I'm really sorry, I stammered, trying to take back my words. Jeff stared at me, his brow furrowed, and said, So you have material? I replied cautiously, not sure what he was getting at. Yes or no? He looked at me, clearly losing patience. Yes, I said hesitantly. All right. Jeff cracked his knuckles and nodded to Monty. Here's the deal, I give you some of my material, and you give me yours. We'll both perform at 2 different clubs 2 nights in a row. First night, you do your set in mine. The next night, I do the same with yours. We'll let the audience and Monty be the judges. If you're better, I'll learn from you. If I'm better, you keep your advice and shove it somewhere. Deal? Oh boy, a real challenge. A classic challenge, that is. I'd never encountered a challenge like that and instantly agreed. Sure, who won mattered. But what mattered more was that I'd have this story to tell for the rest of my life. I pretended to think it over carefully, weigh it out, even though I was 150% on board already. It's just that, of course, I wasn't going to give Jeff my best stuff. Why would I? No need to make things hard on myself, and surely I figured Jeff would play the same game. He wasn't stupid. All right, let's do it. I nodded, extended my hand for a handshake with Jeff, and we were officially in right then and there. Okay, 2 weeks from now. I need your material within a week so I have time to practice. I'll get mine to you through Monty. 2 weeks at Comedy Club and Marcel's both have open mic nights, and hopefully we, especially me, win. Good luck, Tonto. There you have it, I got called Tonto. That nickname stuck with me ever since, even though Jeff never meant any harm. If there was a nickname I didn't like, all I had to do was say it and he'd stop. But that didn't help, because he had 100 other nicknames ready to replace it. The worst was Michael Bolton, native version, after a disastrous attempt at perming my hair. Seriously, major lesson learned, Indians should never get perms. Monty chuckled gleefully, rubbing his hands in excitement. I'm gonna make a killing off this. It's gonna be a sellout, all the time, it's gonna be awesome. I glanced at Jeff, as if to make sure nothing was prearranged, and he met my gaze with a smile that could only be described as triumphant, sparkling with playful mischief. It's the kind of smile that if you're on the receiving end, could easily steal your girl without anyone noticing. So I went back to my place, rummaged through my material, and picked out some of the worst stuff. When I say worst, I mean the stuff that never got a laugh, at least not after I performed it. 15 pages of material I considered heavy and not funny at all I sent to Monty. In return, I got 10 pages from Jeff that were so convoluted I had to reread them a couple of times before getting the story. The whole week after, every night after class, I sat practicing, doing my best with the material I had. I spliced together Jeff's stuff with the best 10 minutes of comedy I had, and as the night of the competition approached, I was ready. Meanwhile, Monty had whipped the whole school into a frenzy about this showdown, and the honor of Northwestern's communications department became the hot topic. People stopped me in the hallway to wish me luck, and according to the rumor mill, both clubs were sold out. Monty even planned on filming the whole thing because phone cameras weren't around yet. So after it was all over, we'd be able to watch each other's sets. Honestly, I was dying to see what he had done with my material. I figured maybe I could learn something from it. My night went off without a hitch. The crowd was roaring with laughter, non-stop applause. I'd never been received so enthusiastically, and in that moment I thought, this is the life I want. The feeling of people patting me on the back, buying me beers, even some quick kisses, had me intoxicated with success. Truly awesome. Then the next night, I stayed home, anxiously waiting to see how Jeff would do. When Monty got back, he didn't say anything, didn't look me in the eye. I knew right away that it wasn't good news. He popped open a beer, plopped down, took a swig and said bluntly, "Sorry, Ben. You were good, but he was better." I sat there, looking at him, shifting in my seat. Was he significantly better? Monty sighed. Yeah. Tell me, how much better? Same material, but not the same. The thing is, his delivery was different. He paid attention to every little moment. He knew when to pause, when to emphasize. His facial expressions and body language were really on point. It was just great. He did something I thought you wanted to do, but you haven't gotten there yet. I just sat there, staring down at my shoes, a jumble of emotions rising inside me. Monty patted me on the shoulder. Honestly, Ben, you did better than I've ever seen you. You're really good. But Jeff, he's better. I'm sorry. I just nodded, finished my beer and slumped onto the bed. Monty seemed a little too drunk. He passed out quickly, leaving me staring up at the ceiling. Okay, Jeff was better, but that didn't mean I was bad, right? There's room for plenty of comedians. But even as I reassured myself, the feeling of defeat lingered. The next day, I went to class, but everyone seemed to avoid me. A few people sheepishly said sorry. Even the professor wasn't calling on me. An invisible wave of shame washed over everything. That night, Monty and I sat down to watch Jeff's set. I couldn't deny it. He was good. He knew when to pause, when to emphasize, to let the story sink in instead of rushing to the next joke like I always did. I watched the whole thing, no laughter, just bitter disappointment and frustration. Honestly, I spent a month drowning in misery. I went to class, turned in my assignments, got passing grades, but it was all minimum effort. Every night, I would replay Jeff's set, rewind, take notes, trying to figure out what made him so superior. Monty tried to pull me out a few times, but I refused, flat out. How I got out of that funk? Well, let me tell you my version, because Jeff has told this story a few times on talk shows, but his way. There was a knock at the door, and honestly, I didn't want to open it. But then I heard this high-pitched voice outside yelling Candygram. Candygram for Mongo. Well, who could refuse to open the door for a classic line from Blazing Saddles? That movie was really iconic for its time, one of those that no one would dare remake today. Standing outside was Jeff, holding a 12-pack of Milwaukee's Best. Right? Jeff was always the one who knew how to save every penny. "Busy?" he asked, and without waiting for me to answer, he weaseled his way into my room. I looked at him, feeling like asking seemed a bit redundant. I stood by the door, watching Jeff plop down on my bed, pop open a beer with a natural ease, as if this was his room, and he mumbled, "Oh, come on in, why don't you?" "Oh look, you did." "What are we watching here?" Jeff asked, eyes glued to the TV screen. "Wait, is that my show?" Jeff turned to me, looking confused. "Why are you watching this? I mean, not to brag, but I killed it. But why are you watching this?" "Oh, to get some pointers, right?" He even did the air quotes around the word pointers. God, I seriously wanted to punch him right then and there. "You really want to know why?" I challenged, locking eyes with him. Sure, Jeff shrugged, leaning back, burped, and took another gulp of beer. The guy had this ridiculous ability to chug beers without ever gaining an ounce. "All right," I raised an eyebrow, sitting down on the edge of the bed facing him. Grabbing a beer and rewinding the tape, I stared at the screen, took a deep breath, and began to tear his performance apart. I critique at every second of the footage, pausing, pointing out every flaw, from his stance, his delivery, to the moments where he should have paused for emphasis. I dissected how he missed opportunities for bigger laughs and where the story wasn't landing. I laid out everything I'd absorbed after watching this thing over and over again. Jeff sat there, staring at me, holding a bag of Cheetos completely forgotten. For the first time ever, it seemed, he was actually listening. And just like Monty had honestly said Jeff was better than me on stage, Jeff couldn't deny what I was saying. I could see it clicking in his head. And the thing that pissed me off the most was that he didn't even seem to try. Jeff had killed the stage without breaking a sweat. After I let loose with all my criticism, Jeff just looked at me, shrugged nonchalantly, and said, "Oh, that's cool, man. I haven't even watched your set yet." Great, just perfect. By then, we'd put away about 5 beers each, and I stepped out to clear my head a bit. When I came back in, Jeff was watching his footage, looking more contemplative this time. "So," he said in a voice that was definitely seasoned with a few beers, "I was wondering." "Wondering what?" I popped another beer, trying to hold back the annoyance. "I hear you've been coasting. I mean, as far as performing goes?" I stopped, staring at him, surprised. Jeff didn't even go to Northwestern gigs. How did he know I was starting to just go through the motions? Was my disappointment that obvious? "So, maybe I don't know. Team up?" Jeff squinted. "You right. You critique. We practice together. You make me better. And hey, I gotta admit, your stuff is better than mine. You make me better, and I perform. You know, Elton John has Bernie Taupin, maybe we could be like that duo? What do you say?" And there, dear readers, is how the Black Cloud Klondike partnership was born. Although, admittedly, Black Cloud being on top was just in our agreement. I didn't answer immediately, but I thought about the offer for a few days. I talked to Monty, to some of the professors in the department. Everyone told me I had talent, but Jeff was something special. Maybe together we could create something truly awesome. But first, everyone advised that I should finish my degree, write scripts for the next year, see if Jeff's success could be replicated. The problem was, I didn't really know Jeff. I'd met him once, seen him perform twice, the second time a painful blow to my ego, and then one drunken night where I tried to dismantle him with angry critiques. Did I really want to go into business with someone who was such a stranger to me? I decided to call Jeff up, tell him to come over to try working together, and see how things went. When Jeff arrived, he brought another case of beer, and Monty was out for the night. I decided to cut to the chase and get to know him better. "What should I know about you?" I came right out and said, reaching for a beer. Jeff grinned, popped open the beer, and leaned back. "Well, let's see, 2 brothers, 1 sister. Sister's still young, just a kid. I'm 24, left home 3 years ago, always dreamed of being a comedian. Richard Pryor, Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, they're my heroes. I hate stupid humor, like the Three Stooges or Mr. Bean. That's just empty laughs. I love comedy because it's hard, and if you do it right, you can do anything. Movies aren't really my thing, but a TV show about me. I wouldn't turn that down. I like political comedy, but fair to both sides. I hate bigotry against trans people and gays, love women, no plans for kids, and I'll never work in a strip club. My first girlfriend was a stripper, and I've seen the dark side of that business. He paused, took a deep breath, took another swig of beer. Want to know more? I nodded, wondering next, what are some topics you don't touch? Like religion, for example? Not really, he replied. I wouldn't attack someone's faith, but if something is a big deal, I won't shy away from it. I want the truth, even if I make a few enemies along the way. So if you had a tour, would you want a theme? I mean, a common thread to connect all the jokes, a kind of persona for the tour. Jeff laughed, shrugged. That's a good idea, but I've never thought about that. Just perform, then find material to fit. Okay, no need to decide now, I reassured him. What about family? Do they mind if you tell stories about them? Jeff shrugged. Not really. Mom and Dad were total hippies. They were just waiting for us to grow up so they could get back to being Moonpie and Thunderclap, or whatever they called each other. They live in some commune in Minnesota, last I heard. I made a mental note, sounded like a goldmine for funny stories. What kind of humor do you like the most? Storytelling, wordplay, observational? Jeff thought for a moment, scratching his head before replying, probably storytelling, with some observational sprinkled in. I want people to laugh because they see themselves in it. And that was the start of our journey, a partnership forged over shared conversations, beers, and endless practice sessions. A journey I, Ben Blackcloud, the guy who always stayed behind the stage lights, hadn't planned on, but one where I truly belonged. After all, who was Jeff K? And more importantly, what stage name would fit him? I tried looking up a few, discovered a character on the comedy website somethingawful.com, but of course we needed to avoid anything related to that site. We went through so many, the Klondike, J.K. Jeffrey, but nothing really felt right. Because you see, Jeff was the kind of guy who didn't need a lot of branding or specific style. He was just Jeff, a little bit reckless, rule-bending, beer-obsessed, and living a free-spirited life like a stray dog. Morality. Don't expect much. Jeff lived life his own way. Then one night, Jeff was on stage, trying out some new material. We'd built up a loyal audience, but this new experimental joke wasn't landing. He looked at the quiet crowd, sighed, and blurted out, "Well, this one's not working, is it?" Then Jeff glanced at me, standing in the wings, signaling cut to end the set early. "Let's just end this painful set, hairbrush," he joked, then turned back to the audience. "Sorry guys, I'm trying out some new stuff. Sometimes it doesn't work." One audience member shouted back, "It's all right, Clonkers, we still love you." That night, the name Clonkers was born. We tried a lot of different performance styles. Some famous comedians always had a very specific look. Larry, the cable guy, always had a goofy cowboy look. Jerry Seinfeld with his classic suit. And Ben Elton, from the UK, with his flamboyant, glittery suits. But Jeff, we tried everything from turtlenecks, button-downs, jeans to all kinds of suits, but nothing clicked. Finally, Jeff just wore what he came to the gig in: jeans, Converse sneakers, a band t-shirt over a lightweight Hawaiian shirt, and a baseball cap, and that was pretty much his style from then on. When Jeff got famous, some brands were willing to pay big money just to have him wear their stuff on stage. But Jeff couldn't care less. He wore what felt comfortable, and that was it. The more I worked with Jeff, the more I discovered he was reliable, much more put together than his messy exterior suggested. Jeff's apartment by the river in Chicago was always tidy, and he was punctual. Sure, Jeff drank like a fish, but who didn't in those days? It was a time fueled by adrenaline, soda, and fast food. Neither of us wanted to touch anything harder, like hard drugs, having both witnessed the devastating impact of cocaine addiction in the late 80s. Jeff's comedic style was usually sharp and daring, sometimes a little crude. He'd only get comfortable letting loose when he knew someone could handle it. It took a while for him to really feel comfortable with me. And there was Maury, Jeff's manager, the only one who knew Jeff nearly as well as I did and Maury. As for me, once I graduated, we had successful shows locally, even a few tour dates in Wisconsin and Indiana, with clubs constantly asking Jeff back. A few big comedy companies like Second City reached out to me to manage their stage, but I didn't think about it long term. I was more in control of everything working with Jeff. After the first year, It was clear we needed a real manager if we wanted to take things further. That's when we got Maury Slocum. Maury wasn't just experienced and well-connected, he understood Jeff. He got us into top clubs in Detroit, and he bargained so well that the club owner had no choice but to accept our terms. That night, we took him out to dinner, and eventually, Maury signed us. So there we were, a team with Jeff killing it on stage while I designed everything from the ground up. Jeff knew he needed my writing talent, and he never acted unfairly when it came to sharing power. It wasn't always about the money. Jeff wanted us to be fair. Right from the beginning, he wanted the revenue split 60-40 with him taking 60, not because he needed it, but because he felt it was right. Later, when Maury negotiated a big TV deal for Jeff, things got more complicated. TV was a whole different beast from stand-up, and they didn't need me for the writing. According to the contract, I was still supposed to get 40% of Jeff's earnings, but as partners, I knew I should give that up. I didn't want him to have to create a sub-company or change the contract because of this. In the end, we agreed that that money was all Jeff's. That TV show was a really great opportunity for Jeff. It was a sitcom built around Jeff, where he could fully express his abilities, blending his comedic style with some serious substance. The main premise was that Jeff was a DJ who was mistakenly sent to heaven prematurely by an angel. When they tried to send him back to life, his body had been cremated, and Jeff landed in the body of a middle-aged priest. From there, he and the priest had to vie for control of the body, each with completely opposite lifestyles, full of hilarious situations, but also with life lessons. The show quickly became a hit, and audiences loved it. I didn't participate in the show, just watched episodes as a regular viewer. But, being with Jeff, I contributed a lot to creating the Clonkers persona, a comedic identity that made audiences roar with laughter, but also got him into trouble a few times. I was both his stage manager and his writer. And to make sure everything ran smoothly, I was responsible for organizing every detail for Jeff's gigs, from lighting and sound to costumes. Running a show is never easy. At a comedy club, everything is there, from the lights to the sound equipment. But when you move to bigger theaters, things change. I had to oversee stage construction, light setup, hire technicians, and coordinate everything so that each of Jeff's performances would be at the top of their game. Working with Jeff was like that. There were times when it was tiring, disagreements, but in the end, we were a team. We both knew that neither of us could succeed without the other. And, as Jeff always said, he didn't need to be the one in the spotlight, didn't need anyone to look at him as a star. He just wanted people to laugh, he just wanted to make their lives a little bit funnier whenever they were having a bad day. Managing a show for Jeff was like running a huge machine, and I was the one who had to operate every cog. From major decisions to tiny details, everything was on me. But that was just the beginning. Things got a lot more complicated when we moved to arenas or venues not designed for a comedy event. Now, I had to bring in a whole team of experts to make sure the show went smoothly, from the crew that set up the lights and sound, to the light operators, the LED screen crew. The seating needed special arrangements. Usually, arenas don't have seating on the grass, so we had to rent chairs and a whole flooring crew to protect the turf, avoid damaging the grass. Everything from seemingly minor tasks like hiring bathroom attendants to major details like the lighting rig, someone had to handle it. Then imagine doing all that in a foreign country. While we rarely performed in countries where English wasn't the primary language, when Netflix went global, we ended up in the Netherlands, France, and Spain. Those times, I'd be coordinating everything remotely, sometimes at the crack of dawn or the middle of the night. And that's when headache meds became my constant companion. And that's without even mentioning the writing. Writing for Jeff was a joy. It allowed me to see how he took my ideas and made them something entirely different on stage. Each story, each joke was infused with his unique style, which always excited and made me proud. We did this for almost a decade before things changed, changes triggered by those special women. We weren't short of female fans, and a successful comedian like Jeff never had to try too hard to attract women. But oddly, despite being so charismatic on stage, Jeff was strangely clumsy when it came to talking to women. Sometimes he'd even resort to the Clonkers persona to respond, as if he didn't know what else to do. This made me tired of hearing the same old tired jokes again and again just because Jeff thought it would make the girls laugh. As for me, I wasn't the most famous guy in the room, so I had to figure out my own strategies. I had a way of using that mysterious native guy image to attract the fairer sex. A little bit of mystique, a little bit of humility, and just a certain intensity in my gaze, and I was good to go. We didn't really have any secret knowledge about love and relationships, but when you have an edge, why not use it? When hanging out with Jeff, however, things were totally different. In that case, it was all, do you want to meet him? And then I became the guy on the sidelines. I learned to hunt on nights when Jeff had a companion, because then I could lock eyes with someone without worrying about Jeff cutting in. It was a life of constant motion, and for us, the career was everything. For a comedian, touring is essential. While bands can make money off album sales, and tours are a promotional tool, for Jeff, the gigs were the product. We could film sets, but the truth is, comedy doesn't have the same replay value as music. A show only touches audiences' emotions once, then its value fades. There are two types of comedy tours. First, there's the do whatever it takes kind, which is what every comedian has to do on their way up. Back then, we'd hit every club, even perform on local television shows, not missing a chance to get people to know Jeff and remember his face. Slowly, people started recognizing Jeff and would remember him when he appeared on TV or was mentioned. The second type of tour was the big one, where we performed our best material after we'd refined it through a ton of tryouts. Audiences paid top dollar to see a big show, and they expected a killer performance. So we had to make sure every joke was polished to perfection. Every big tour was a blur of long days and consecutive nights performing, traveling from city to city without a chance to go home for months. That kind of hectic and demanding lifestyle made it tough to maintain relationships, unless you were with someone who understood that the career came first. This only became easier when you were successful enough to make the gigs less frequent. For some comedians, the ultimate goal was television or movies, where you could stay in one place and have a more stable schedule. But, as I saw it, when you move to TV and film, you become more distant from that real feeling of being on stage. Stand-up comedy, honestly, is all about connecting with audiences and their emotions. Guys like Tim Allen or Jay Leno could balance stage and television, but eventually they too had to choose a more stable path. In the world of TV and film, you've got a whole support crew, and things become more comfortable. But when you're on stage, you're on your own, sometimes getting ready in a tiny cramped bathroom. It's a world where you have to learn to adapt, never think that the world owes you anything, and accept that the stage is where you get to be your most authentic self, where you can make people laugh, you can kill the room with a well-timed joke, and connect with the audience like nowhere else. It took 8 long years, but we finally reached the peak every comedian dreams of, a call from Jimmy Kimmel Live. It was the biggest moment of Jeff's career. Backstage that day, I felt not only proud, but a deep sense of happiness for all the effort we put in. Jeff had 5 minutes to win over the audience, and he made them roar with laughter. That night, I called my family on the reservation, sharing every moment with them. Everything changed, we were officially on top. The Kimmel gig opened up tons of new opportunities, including a few comedy game shows that helped promote his image. We knew we had about 6 months to keep the momentum going, and then we would start our national tour. And just like other managers had predicted, we'd have to handle everything ourselves and hire people to direct every detail. So 6 months later, we kicked off the tour at smaller clubs, running from city to city to warm up for the big shows. It took countless nights of practice to get a 90-minute set we were both happy with. But a big tour doesn't come cheap. Don't think you just book Madison Square Garden and pay later. No, everything is due up front. And this first tour, called the Insecure Man Tour, cost almost $10 million. We didn't know it at the time, but platforms like Netflix, Amazon, or Hulu only accepted shows from people who'd proven their appeal with successful tours. And there was no pre-financing, we were taking all the risk. Luckily, Sky News from Europe was interested and funded half the costs, while the rest we had to borrow from a Saudi Arabian bank. Needless to say, that debt felt pretty damn awful. But what could we do when no bank in the country would lend us money just to go on tour? In the end, everything went crazy well. We made triple our initial investment, paid back the loan, settled the interest, and I got my 40% cut. Sky News broadcast the tour, making us famous across Europe, and Netflix ended up picking up Jeff's own show. Finally, every acting gig offer started flooding in, and now they were coming to us, not us knocking on their doors. We reached a level of success that made life a blur of Vegas nights, some of which I don't even remember. One thing I always admired about Jeff was that he never touched drugs, even though the temptation of stimulants and enhanced foods was always present. We had experimented with weed, but quickly realized that the substances made us too scatterbrained and out of control for efficient work. Eventually, we cut it out completely. So many people had lost their lives to alcohol and drugs, I didn't want to go down that path, and neither did Jeff. As for women, it's fair to say that wherever we went, there were always enthusiastic fans willing to make a move. For Jeff, it seemed it was just a given. He didn't have to try, didn't have to put in any effort. But oddly, despite being a star on stage, Jeff was really clumsy when it came to interacting with women in real life. He didn't know how to flirt without making things awkward. When he got flustered, Jeff would slip into the Clonkers character and hit them with his tired old jokes, sometimes inappropriately. As for me, I learned to cleverly use my native mystique to draw women in. A little bit of dreaminess, a few veiled statements about my mysterious knowledge of the homeland, and they were hooked. But if there was one rule, it was to steer clear of women who were already in relationships. Jeff was less stringent, he'd look for a ring, but wouldn't really inquire further. As for me, I would ask directly. For me, respecting someone else's relationship was something I couldn't compromise on. There were a few times when Jeff unintentionally intervened in my game. I'd be having a nice conversation with a girl, and Jeff would show up. She'd instantly become captivated, switching all her attention to Jeff, leaving me feeling awkward. All my efforts vanished. He didn't do it on purpose, but Jeff's fame inadvertently created that situation. Jeff knew it. Sometimes he'd even ask, "You good, you not mad?" It was hard to answer. If I said good, he'd back off, but what was the point when the girl wasn't interested in me anymore? It was better to let him go, and find my own fun, if there was time. But as Jeff got even more famous, things became more complicated. A level of fame you just can't understand until you've lived it. Jeff couldn't go to the movies normally. The moment he appeared at the theater, all eyes would be on him. Grocery shopping? Forget it. The second he stepped in, people would swarm him for photos and autographs. Even having a private cell phone was difficult. So many T-Mobile or AT employees had leaked his number. Despite that, Jeff used it to his advantage to create goodwill. We'd go to an upscale restaurant, and even though the meal would be comped, Jeff would always have the bill transferred to another family's table. He felt better knowing he was still being kind, despite all the privileges that success had brought. But as with all celebrities, Jeff had to be careful with new close relationships. When you're successful, people approach you not just for who you are, but for what you can bring to the table. So the friends who stuck with Jeff before he got famous, like me, became even more important. And of course, as life became more complex, we relied on each other more. But eventually things had to crack, and the reason, as usual, was a woman. Looking back, I don't think Jeff had malicious intent. He wasn't a bad guy, and I'm saying this after seeing everything unfold. He wasn't intentionally trying to hurt anyone, but he also wasn't spending enough time really thinking about the impact of his actions. Jeff lived for the present, for fleeting moments, to the point where he almost ignored everything else. And that was Jeff, the guy I understood, the guy I cherished and got annoyed with, but also the guy I knew. Through thick and thin, we'd been through it all together. On tour, there were meet and greet events where I didn't have to be there, but whenever there was new material to try out or adjust, I was right by Jeff's side. And it's no secret, these tours were not short of women. Looking back, sometimes I feel confused and embarrassed when I think about some of the things we did. You know, people say boys will be boys, but for me, that's just an excuse. It's like trying to disavow responsibility for the consequences, especially for those who were hurt. But the truth is, when you have no oversight, it's easy to give in to temptation and enjoy it as part of the tour life. They say a person's true character is what they do when no one's looking. And in those moments we truly went down some rabbit holes. We weren't deceitful, always upfront, and knew how to protect ourselves, but we didn't shy away from enjoying everything we could. Jeff and I even had a few ground rules that made saying goodbye the next morning easier. After a night, no matter how tired, we'd roll over, grab our phones or watches, and shout, "Damn it, I have an early flight." That would make whoever was on the other side of the bed jump up, quickly get dressed, and get out of there, leaving the room for the two lone travelers like us. The most awkward times were when they asked for phone numbers. We both didn't want to deal with constant calls from people we barely remembered, but we didn't want to give fake numbers either. That was too cruel. So, we used a spare phone, a real number that we checked once a week, sometimes to respond to a few messages but mostly to ignore. I'd often tell them, "This is my number, but I'm busy, I might not get back to you right away." letting them know not to hold their breath. Still, some girls weren't accepting of that excuse. Some would pout or demand more, and a few even got aggressive. When that happened, the best thing was to gently explain, "I had fun last night, but I can't really make any promises right now." It may not have fully calmed things down, but it at least eased the tension. I won't deny that in those years we had our share of fun. True hedonists, we roamed hotel rooms, restrooms, anywhere we could. We even once rewrote the lyrics to Mambo No. 5 with the names of the girls from those nights. Looking back, it was definitely disrespectful, but back then, we didn't see things from the same perspective we do today. But then I met Monica. There's always someone who makes you stop and see the world differently, right? She was a breath of fresh air, shaking up my world in ways I never expected. I believe the notion of there's someone for everyone is cheesy. For me, everyone finds their other half at the right time. It just comes when you're open, ready, and it's a good fit. If it's the right time, you'll find the things you've always been searching for in that person. And I guess with Monica, everything aligned. Monica Whittaker was a journalist for the Sun-Times in Chicago, writing for the weekend section. She was lined up to interview me, not Jeff. She knew about our 5050 partnership. That intrigued her because in her experience, it was very rare to see a writer behind a comedian sharing the workload. Monica had done a profile on Jeff a couple of years back, and we had only briefly crossed paths then, but now she wanted to know more about the guy behind the scenes. She wanted to understand me, what role I played in Jeff's career. Was I just a shadow or the brain behind it all? The interview took place at a cute little cafe in Aurora, right by the river running through the city. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I got there early, relaxing at a round table outdoors. When Monica walked in, I found myself not just looking forward to the conversation, but excited about what was coming. I looked Monica up and down, assessing her quickly, like an instinct. She was about 5'9", with thick, luscious brown hair that reached her shoulders, a rich chestnut brown that looked amazing in the sunlight. A sleek jacket outlined her slender waist, and she wore well-fitting jeans. I told myself to observe more when she walked, because maybe a great set of legs could be even more captivating than a captivating face. "Mr. Blackcloud," she smiled, extending her hand. "How's your morning?" "Totally awesome," I replied with a bit of George Carlin's humor. "Totally awesome, and just okay, all at the same time." She laughed, then gave a half smile as she responded, "Okay, we'll see if we can change that." Monica pulled out a tiny recorder from her bag, fiddled with it for a moment, and placed it on the table between us. "I'll grab a coffee," she said, standing up and walking through the glass doors to the counter. Just my luck, I had a chance to check out her walk as she moved away. Those long legs and that curvy hip line, good God, a truly spectacular view. I chuckled to myself, knowing I was just another sucker for that look. On a whim, I cleared my throat and leaned towards the recorder, as if I were answering a call. "Hey Jeff, yeah, I'm in an interview." "Yeah, she looks pretty good. What do you want me to do?" "Jeff, that's illegal in some states." "Oh no, you can't joke like that." "A monkey in a car battery? To do what?" "Jeff, listen, don't think I'll be sending pics back." I stopped when Monica returned to the table, her eyes twinkling as she threw a playful question at me. "A monkey and a car battery." I chuckled nervously. Jeff's idea, not mine. "Well, good for me then," she leaned back with a smile that I could only describe as bright and mysterious. "But I'm genuinely curious about the car battery and the monkey," she said, tilting her head as she looked at me. "Let's see who's going to do it and why. It's such a bizarre personal interest." I burst out laughing, slightly blushing. I think if you want to know, Google has a lot of references. But to be honest, I wouldn't recommend it. "But not the recorder." She shook her head, her eyes sparkling mischievously. She leaned back, her eyes scanning me with a knowing look. "You're not at all what I expected," she said, her voice sweet but with a clear undertone. I laughed. "What were you expecting?" She pulled out a notepad, flipped it open, and skimmed through her notes. "Well, according to this, you were number 3 in your class at Northwestern, majoring in communications. Part of the Navajo tribe, but you reportedly don't mention it often. You were pursuing theater, and then suddenly met Jeff, like a strange twist of fate, then became his manager and writer, an inseparable half of the partnership. And though you don't have any long-term relationships, you've had quite a few, let me use the most gentle term, interesting experiences." She raised an eyebrow with an oddly serious look, and I laughed, thinking someone must have spilled the beans on my wild travels. Rumors are you live in a 3-bedroom apartment on the west side of the Loop, have a brother who lives with the tribe, you go back home to visit the family often, and apparently, not gay. She looked at me with a suggestive look. And of course, you have pretty great hair. I laughed and nodded. That's not a very accurate representation of me, is it? She pondered for a moment, then gently nodded. To be honest, I envisioned you as a bit of a hanger-on like a groupie. She chuckled quietly. I mean, it's rare to see a working relationship that closes, but not out of personal gain. But you're not that kind of guy, are you? You exist to make Jeff successful more than yourself. I looked down at my coffee, reminding myself to be careful not to say anything that would hurt Jeff. That's right. Jeff's a better performer than me. I think it's as simple as that. And we both know that we can only make a great comedian together. With me, he performs better. And with him, I write better. It's a symbiotic relationship. We both have each other's backs. So why? She asked, clearly not easily discouraged. Why did you give up your dreams to chase his? I remained silent for a moment before answering. Because we were a team. I saw him on stage, and I realized that if I focused on writing and managing behind the scenes, we'd go further. I knew I wasn't as good as him at getting the audience to roar, and he knew he wouldn't go far without me. She slowly nodded, her eyes lighting up, realizing I was dodging a little. But you know, the rumors about you two being a couple always persist, she said, her eyes sparkling as she threw out the unexpected question. I took a sip of coffee, nearly choking on it. Wait, what? I was dumbfounded. No, Jeff and I are just best friends. Where did you hear that? She smiled, her eyes mischievous. I'm not disclosing my sources, but his competition always throws up interesting tales. I chuckled, trying to stay composed. I think if anyone was rumored to be in a relationship, I wouldn't be a bad choice. Jeff's handsome, talented, but to be clear, we're just good buddies. She smirked and said, I know. Actually, I find dark hair, long, mysterious types much more appealing, she said, her voice teasing. Then she shrugged, her eyes brightening with a humorous thought. I don't picture either of you as someone who'd let the other one be on top either. I burst out laughing, unable to contain it. Oh, no way would Jeff ever bring me down. I have to be the one on the bottom. And then, like a bolt from the blue, I realized what I'd just blurted out in front of the girl who I was pretty sure was flirting with me. Monica, with her radiant smile and chuckling laughter, clearly saw my face shift as she understood what I'd just said. Oh, now there's a challenge, she laughed, pretending to pull out her phone. Let me grab my camera and we'll see. Better have a wide-angle lens, I quipped. When you slip up like that, you might as well play it out, because the more you try to cover it up, the worse it gets. Monica laughed uproariously, her eyes gleaming as if I'd just done exactly what she'd been hoping for. You're making claims you can't back up, she narrowed her eyes. And can you actually drive a nail through a piece of wood with your tool? No? Oh, well, a girl's gotta have standards. That was a classic joke from Real Genius. And that moment made me realize that Monica not only had a sense of humor, but was also a fan of classic films like me. I laughed, raising an eyebrow. A man needs to have a little bit of mystery. The atmosphere instantly shifted from interview tension to unmasked flirting. Monica laughed and continued, Okay, let's get back to the interview. But hey, can I try something more interesting? Try what? I tilted my head, asking. She blinked, looking straight at me. Are you busy today? Anything you have to do related to Jeff? I looked at Monica, surprised, then thought about my packed schedule. Well, I have to meet with the stage design team for the upcoming tour. I need to go to the office to discuss the Wembley Arena tickets, go over the flyers, and I have dinner with a Netflix executive at the end of the day to talk about the special. Well, that's great. She lit up. Can I come along? I want to see you work, see you in action. Okay? I looked at Monica, dubious. Why would you want to do that? It's not going to be that exciting all day. Monica tilted her head, her eyes mischievous. Look, I can't watch you write, can I? But I've seen a few of Jeff's shows from before you two started working together. And I bet you write the best parts. I want to see how you do it, to understand you better. Maybe the article will be sharper. Please. I hesitated, then smirked, deciding to tease her back. Look, admit it, You have a thing for me, and you're trying to find a way to spend time with me. You just want to be around this hair and this killer body all day, right?" Monica laughed, then blushed. "Well, yeah, I can't resist. You're such a charming guy. That hair, truly, it makes me want to sink into it all day." Finally, I shrugged and laughed, signaling agreement. "Okay, but you've been warned it's not all fun and games. Your call." And that, as I like to think, was our first date, even though she'd later laugh and deny it was a date. Monica also later admitted that something about me drew her in. Maybe that was why she decided to spend the whole day observing and verifying, as she said. We ended the day with the Netflix executive, who was instantly smitten with Monica and spent the whole time trying to charm her. Later, as we left dinner, Monica just smiled and said, "You're lucky, I'm not interested," she winked, implying a one-sided crush on the female executive. Her playful comment sparked a few not-so-innocent thoughts in me, but I just laughed in response. As we drove back to the city, Monica suggested drinks at a small bar near Diversey Avenue. We sat and chatted, and that's when I learned more about her. She had a brother, her family was in Florida, and she hated the stifling heat of that place. Like me, she had a different career path than her family, becoming a journalist after watching All the President's Men with her dad. Her dad was her hero, and she had never gotten over the grief of his death on 9/11s. After that event, Monica went into journalism with dreams of becoming a war correspondent or exposing political underbelly. She said, "Now I do lifestyle pieces, not a grand career goal, but at least I get to meet interesting people, travel, and figure out what I want." She was 31, just a few years older than me, and had gone through what she called her figure me out phase after discovering her ex-boyfriend had reunited with his ex-wife. Since then, Monica had been living alone in a small apartment. Talking to her, I felt a rare connection. She was free-spirited, unafraid of being her true self, and not trying to please anyone. As we said goodbye, I nervously asked, "So, any chance I could see you again?" Monica smiled, raised an eyebrow, and teased, "Oh, that's a first. I think I'm going to make you work for it, don't you?" "What's it going to take?" I asked, not knowing what she'd say. "You're going to have to take me out for dinner. Somewhere quiet, just the two of us. No recorder and no Jeff. I want to see who you really are," she replied, her eyes sparkling mischievously. I nodded immediately. "Okay, how about Friday?" "Pick me up at 7, she replied, leaning in and gently kissing my cheek. "Let's see what you can come up with." Then Monica disappeared into a taxi on the side of the road, leaving me standing there, not even having asked for her address. The next day I had to call the Sun-Times, leaving my contact info, and then I got a text from her 2 days later. Just the address. Bingo. I scheduled the evening, finding myself really drawn into getting to know everything about her. When Friday night came, we had a quiet, but laugh-filled dinner, and by Sunday we both had a tacit understanding that we were a couple, without any declaration or vows. Every night when I finished work, I'd call Monica, no matter where in the world she or I was. Monica was still a lifestyle writer for the Sun-Times, but her name was starting to rise. Some of her interviews were even getting aired. She was becoming a known name, and she was meeting some big-time people. Sometimes she'd even join me, taking the opportunity to interview someone wherever we were touring. Jeff instantly liked Monica, in a big brother kind of way. But right from the start, I pulled him aside and laid it out straight. "I really like her, so keep your hands off. Things will get real bad if you do." That warning was clear evidence of how significant Monica had become to me. Looking back on that time, I realized Monica was truly the woman I wanted in my life. Someone who was always up front and didn't hide who she was. She didn't care about Jeff's fame, she didn't idolize my role in his success, and to be honest, it was really refreshing. She just wanted to know me, without needing all the glitz and glamour or the name recognition to mask who I was. Monica and I became closer with each trip. The relationship was so serious that I even took her home to meet the family. As expected, she was warmly welcomed. Even my dad, who usually had a stoic expression, was incredibly fond of her. He even invited Monica to join the sweat lodge ceremony in the evening, then glanced at me and joked, "You can sweat any way you want," with the suggestive eyebrow raise he thought was hilarious. I could only shake my head in exasperation. It was both embarrassing and unbelievable to think, how did I inherit his sarcastic genes? On longer trips, Monica would ask me the strangest things. "If you had to choose, would you kiss, sleep with, Or marry someone Hillary Clinton, Melania Trump, or Rachel Maddow? The unexpected question required some thought, but then I'd give my answer. And then she'd throw another question at me. If you could choose how to die, how would you go? Dying while being overloved sounded kind of reasonable, but I found it interesting how she always had a way of making things fresh and unique. Another thing about Monica was how she looked at people. She would often worry about the nameless, the ones not mentioned when some tragic news broke. People talked about the perpetrator, but she would think about their family, how they'd be affected. That sensitivity touched me and made me love her more. She was like an untitled psychologist, always trying to understand people deeply. And because of that, I teased that she should go to school for psychology, because clearly she had a knack for it and a passion for the field. Monica just laughed and replied, "I like my current job because it pays the bills, Ben." But of course, Monica wasn't perfect. She had this habit of disappearing for days without warning while she was focused on researching a subject for an interview. She'd read everything about them, try to connect with people involved, and build a complete picture before the interview. I once joked that if she wasn't a journalist, she'd be a top background investigator for the CIA. Monica laughed, tossed her hair, and replied, "I bet I'd be better than them." The thing was, she never understood why I would get upset when she'd go missing for days on end. She'd show up as if nothing had happened, smile and say, "You know how I am, right?" I wasn't sure why she didn't see anything inconvenient in me feeling bad about it. She also had a very peculiar laundry habit. I thought it was cute how she would borrow my clothes, not realizing that the reason was she never washed her own. One day I got back a jacket she had borrowed, and it definitely needed a wash. Maybe the scent of your loved one was always romantic, if it didn't smell like leftover food and accumulated stains from a few weeks back. From then on, if I was sleeping over at Monica's, I'd always open the windows for ventilation, and I ended up having to do her laundry a few times. Monica wasn't really into pets, either: dogs, cats, even fish. She'd instantly back away if a dog got too close, or change directions if she saw someone walking a pet on the street. I guess it was a childhood phobia, but whatever it was a quirky and endearing thing about her. I met Monica's family too, and while I respected them, I couldn't help but be surprised. While Monica was intelligent and insightful, her family reminded me of weird news stories from Florida. They'd ask me a bunch of questions like, "Hey Benny, I got a joke I want to tell you, maybe you can use it in your show." Monica would just stare at me helplessly and text that she'd make it up to me after I endured this fun conversation. However, there was one thing about our relationship that made me think. Monica didn't want to have kids, at least not at that time. For me, a family with kids was a lifelong dream. I knew her stance, but I always held on to the hope that maybe one day Monica would change her mind. That fateful conversation happened one day while we were picnicking in Lincoln Park. I was feeding Monica grapes when I saw a family playing with their kids and said, "Look at them. They look like so much fun. I wish I could be a photographer to capture this moment." Monica raised an eyebrow and replied, "Everyone has a phone to take pictures, Ben. Just hold it up and click," then casually laid down, placing a slice of cucumber over her eyes in a dramatic pose. I tried to hide my disappointment, but when I heard her continue, "I really don't get why everyone is so into kids and families. I don't want them at all." Everything stopped. I slowly turned to face her, trying to contain the tension. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice softening. "I thought wanting kids was something all women wanted." Monica sat up, sensing the urgency in my voice. "Ben, we need to talk about this," she said, her eyes locked on mine with a firm gaze. "I don't want kids. Not now, not ever. I don't like kids, they annoy and tire me out. And I don't want to have to change my whole life for them." She said it decisively, as if she'd thought about it for a long time. I wanted to argue, but Monica continued, "I understand that kids can be a joy for others, but that's not what I need. I love my freedom, and I don't want anything holding me back. I want to do what I like, be with the person I love, and not worry about the obligations that kids bring." I sat there, trying to process every word she was saying. After a while, I softly asked, "What about me?" The question slipped out before I could contain the sadness. Monica took my hand, her eyes gentle but resolute. "Ben, I love you. But I want you to know, I love you, not the kids you want. I don't want imaginary things messing up the relationship we have. Can you understand?" Maybe I'm too rigid about this. I've been criticized about it by many people, my mother for one. The problem is, I can't picture myself having children. I understand that there are a lot of great things that come from them, but from my perspective, there is much more bad than good. It's so lucky to get what you want, and it takes years to figure that out. And even when they are horrible kids, you can't do anything if they are horrible kids. You just sit there and take it. I don't want my future to be like that. I need to be able to get on a plane at a moment's notice and go interview Prince William or President Macron or whoever, and who's going to sit at home and change diapers. You? Don't make me laugh? She looked into my eyes earnestly, the aggression in her attitude softening a little. I sighed. I gotta say, this isn't how we were spending our day. You're asking a lot, Monica. She sighed too, pouting her lips. I know I'm asking a lot. I'm asking for a big sacrifice, I get it. And I know you need to think about that. But this is what I want. We need to have this talk now, before we get married. If it's too big of an ask for you, you need to decide what's more important. No, she saw me about to respond. No, you have to. It's a big deal, I'm not blind to that. Just because it's not important to me doesn't mean it's not important to you. I totally get that. You need to know what you're getting into. We don't need to decide everything today. Even though she clearly already had. I nodded. Then a thought struck me. What are you giving up? I asked. Excuse me, she said, tilting her head. Monica, you're asking me to give up something pretty significant to a guy. How do you plan to balance that out? What are you planning? She asked, cautiously. She could see that we might be entering a negotiation phase, which meant that I was at least considering the idea. So now she treated it as a matter of bargaining. I don't know. I need to think about it. What is there to give up for children? I said thoughtfully. Well, I can assure you of one thing, she declared. And what would that be? I asked. You'll be the best no-kid husband the world has ever known. Anywhere, anytime. Well, yeah, that's true. We left it at that, for the day. We talked later, and I managed to get that's how I feel now. I'm not ruling out the possibility of changing my mind. I'm a woman, after all. That's our prerogative out of her, although I strongly suspected that was just a softener, and not something she actually believed. The marriage to Monica was a product of many challenges and compromises, but in the end, I got the woman of my dreams. We weren't a perfect couple, but who needs perfect when you're together? We were happier than I'd ever thought possible. I wasn't sure if everything I had given up was worth it, but there was no other option if I wanted to keep her by my side. It was like joining a game with no chance to change the rules. We never fully agreed on everything, but the balance we had was special. Monica wasn't afraid to accept the boundaries I set, but she was also very determined about the things she believed in. For instance, the idea of trying out a third person in the relationship was quickly dismissed. No sharing, she said coldly. See, a guy shouldn't be criticized for suggesting, should he? When it comes to agreements, sometimes it's good to ask. 2 years later, I decided to take things a step further. I proactively got a vasectomy, a private gift for Monica that she hadn't expected. We had talked about birth control and its effects on her body. For me, this was not just a way to show my love, but a commitment that she was the one I had chosen to be with forever. Monica had made me happier than I'd ever been, and that was just one of the many reasons I felt lucky to have her. From that day, we were meant for each other. Monica was the best companion I could ask for in work and life. She was creative, bold, and passionate, even when it came to very private things. She always knew how to keep the fire burning between us. Whenever I was stressed from a long day at work, she'd listen, sometimes making me laugh. Then suddenly she'd smile brightly, gently pulling me into her arms. We'd forget all the stress, and there would be only peace and happiness left. For Monica, nothing seemed boring, even when we were just at home. Whenever I had to be away from home with Jeff for gigs, Monica was always busy with her journalism. She had a fierce passion for the stories and people she met, and her career was flourishing. She'd landed interviews that were making waves, and the fame was pushing her into circles I couldn't have predicted. Still, we managed to maintain the connection, maybe even better than before. We were doing everything for each other, and I could see, in Monica's eyes, she felt the same from me. When Jeff got his TV show offer, I didn't feel jealous or regretful letting him go on his own. It was his dream, and I was still there supporting him from behind. Our friendship had gone through many difficult years, and we both knew the value the other brought. Honestly, a little downtime was actually nice for finding myself. After 10 years of traveling with Jeff and living his career, a little distance was necessary. After a while together, Monica moved in with me. My apartment was bigger, brighter, and it just seemed like the right move. About a year later, I proposed to her with a ring she couldn't refuse. Monica said yes, and we got married in Grant Park, right by the Buckingham Fountain on a beautiful fall day. It was a simple but warm wedding. Jeff, of course, was my best man. Who else would be more appropriate? Because of work and the partnership with Jeff, we had a prenuptial agreement. Although we both trusted each other, it was necessary to protect what we had built together. Monica understood completely and had no issues signing it. It wasn't about comparing who had what, but a commitment we made to each other. No matter what, we would never leave each other. The first few years of our marriage were truly a wonderful time. We were happy and proud of what we had, our individual careers, our love, and a deep understanding of each other. But as they say, nothing lasts forever. Small signs started appearing little by little, and they started to paint a picture I couldn't have foreseen. So, at some point, we had to face the reality that no matter how great the love, no matter how compatible we were, there were still significant differences between us. Differences that only time could answer whether they would be the obstacle that pushed us apart or not. And I entered this journey with Monica, with all my heart and hope. But who knows, maybe one day I'd have to face those truths that love can't save. During those years, a lot happened. Jeff reached the peak of his career. We had a massive global tour, and Monica joined us for most of it, which helped us stay close. 18 months, 6 countries, 128 shows, and then I started to see my first gray hairs. The joys of getting older. When I started getting gray, everyone noticed right away because my long, sleek hair couldn't hide anything. One single gray hair stood out like a nun in a strip club. After the tour ended, Jeff took 3 months off to recharge, and I was busy getting new material ready, picking up some side gigs for Jeff whenever he was ready to get back to it. After his break, he went back to film another season of Life is for the Living, and then did a movie. Just a supporting role. But he was excited about this new experience. After that, a Netflix special, and then we were back to spinning our wheels, getting ready for another tour. The new tour was called The Simple Man's Guide to Life. This time, Monica came along for 2/3 of it, and when the tour was over, I didn't know about Jeff, but I definitely needed a vacation. Jeff went to Cannes and then to Spain to film a movie, and Monica and I took 3 months just to travel, exploring some of the cities we'd performed in but hadn't really experienced. The more we traveled, the more I felt like our decision not to have kids was the right one. Maybe that's when I started to truly agree with Monica's take on freedom and independence. Meanwhile, Monica's star was rising. She got to the point where she could handpick her interview subjects. Her interviews were starting to appear in big publications like Playboy, the color sections of the New York Times, The Atlantic, and The New Yorker. She was even asked to be a fill-in co-host on The View a couple of times. But Monica wasn't really into television or those kinds of chatty appearances. She felt like she was better at extracting information from others than being the center of attention. Then, when we got back to Chicago, Jeff did something nobody expected. He announced that he'd met, fallen in love with, and married a woman he met in the south of France. It was out of the blue. Jeff, the guy who lived the carefree single life, enjoying the freedom that fame brought him, had decided to tie the knot. I didn't know if I could believe it until I met Jemima Delura. Jemima was an American model, originally from South Bend, Indiana. She was 24, blonde as can be, with flawless skin, legs that went on forever, and a healthy, alluring beauty. She also had her own money, so she wasn't some gold digger. The way Jeff was acting around her, it was clear Jemima had really changed him. He couldn't do enough to please her. As Monica put it, he's like a lovesick puppy. I asked Jeff about it once when the two of them were having a beer after a gig. What happened in France anyway, Jeff? You've changed. Don't tell me I just met the love of my life. I know you better than that. Jeff looked at me quietly, then took a sip of his beer. Honestly, I don't know, Ben. Everything was perfect. I was living the life I wanted. Then Jemima showed up. I guess I was tired of my old ways, or maybe I was finally ready. All I know is when I saw her with that big smile, that blonde hair, and those legs, I just thought, right, this is the one I need. Jeff chuckled softly, but it seemed like he was still contemplating what had changed in him. He paused for a moment, then continued, I know what you think about my life, Ben. That smug look you get when you're married and I'm still running around. I get it. It's just this is different. Maybe I was ready. Maybe Jem is what I need right now. I can't explain it, I just know I need her. I looked at Jeff with understanding. If you're happy, I'm happy for you. Just remember to get the best prenup you can, I joked, but with real sincerity. From then on, we started hanging out as a group of 4 more regularly. Jemima and Monica hit it off immediately, forming a kind of sisterly friendship, often going shopping together or hanging out at our place. We went to movies together, to art shows, and sometimes even to Bulls or Blackhawks games. Those days were truly peaceful and fun. We were like a little family, close-knit. But then, something felt different. One night, the whole group of us went to Dick's last resort. Jeff sometimes liked to go to places where he could get recognized and then do some impromptu bits. He was in his element, laughing, cracking jokes with people around him. But the rest of us seemed tense, especially Monica and Jemima. The whole evening felt like no one was talking to each other much. It was strange. On the drive home, I turned to Monica and asked, "What just happened? I have this feeling something went down tonight that I'm not aware of." For the whole drive home that night, Monica was evasive, driving me crazy. I knew she was holding something back. The second we got home, I ran out of patience. "Monica, what's going on?" I lowered my voice, but it felt like a shout. "Jeff is my partner, and I have a right to know. You can't keep this from me, you need to tell me now." Monica backed away, looking at me hesitantly, then down at the floor. When I raised my voice, she was clearly shocked by how intense I was being. "Okay, Ben," she said softly, almost whispering. "I'll tell you, but I can't tell you everything. I promised Jemima. You have to understand that, right?" "No, Monica, I don't understand. What kind of promise to anyone else is more important than a promise you make to me? We're married. Your secrets and my secrets should be shared." "Ben, I understand you're angry." Monica looked up at me, her eyes resolute. "But it's not my secret to tell. I know something about Jemima, something she doesn't want anyone to know, not you, not even Jeff. That's the only reason. Please, Ben, trust me." I looked at her, my mind racing with theories. She's cheating, isn't she?" "No," Monica almost shouted. "Ben, she's not doing anything behind Jeff's back. It's just something Jemima keeps private. Please just put the anger aside, Ben. Trust me, I'll tell you if it affects us or Jeff, but this isn't your business. She's not doing anything wrong, and all this will do is destroy our friendship." At that moment, I had no choice but to trust her, even though my mind was racing and I was angry. I looked at Monica's pleading eyes, and a sliver of remaining patience helped me swallow my anger. But before letting it go, I tried one last appeal. "Monica, what about the promise you made to me?" I said. "The promise you swore to in front of everyone when we got married." "This isn't about us, Ben," she replied, her voice trembling but firm. "I promise if anything impacts our life, I will tell you. But it's not my secret and I can't betray her trust. If you love me, understand that and let it go." After a few seconds of silence, I nodded. I wasn't happy about this secrecy, but I had to accept that pushing wouldn't help. I told myself I had to trust her, even though the unease was still simmering. We needed trust in a marriage. What else was there? The following days seemed to get back on track. Monica and Jemima quickly patched things up, and their relationship seemed even stronger. They spent more time together than before, shopping trips, weekend spa getaways, and hours-long chats at our place. Occasionally, when I got home, Jemima was there, laughing and talking with Monica as if there were no weight between them. Every now and then, I'd get a warm smile from Monica before she tactfully suggested I go out or spend some time in my home office. I tried to push it out of my mind, and then time went by. Everything went back to normal, at least for about 6 months. And then Monica started to change. She became more affectionate. Wherever I was, there were her arms around my waist, or her fingers tightly clasping my hand. She fed me when we were out for dinner, smiling at me as if we were on our first date. And when we were at home, after every intimate moment, she'd curl up next to me, smiling happily and giving me soft kisses. At first, I thought this change was amazing, but slowly it started to feel a little off. One morning, while we were having breakfast, I couldn't contain my curiosity anymore. "Monica, I really love how affectionate you've become," I said sincerely. "But is something going on lately?" She paused mid-lift with her coffee cup, her eyes momentarily hesitant. "A married woman can't love her husband like this?" The answer sounded like a joke, but I could see in her eyes a certain complexity that she was trying to hide. I remained silent, saying nothing, just smiling to keep the mood light. Finally, Monica set down her coffee, her hands clasped together, as if she needed a little more confidence. "Ben, I realized that before we got married, I asked you to give up something big," she began, her eyes looking down. "And you did, for me, without complaining. I think I owe you this gratitude. I just want to make sure you know I appreciate what you've sacrificed for me." I smiled. "You don't need to do anything more, Monica. The time I've had with you is the greatest thing in my life." As she said that, her eyes suddenly got watery and tears unexpectedly flowed. She didn't try to hold them back, she just rested her head on my shoulder, letting the emotions flow. I put my arm around her, confused, wondering what I had done wrong. "Monica, what's wrong?" I whispered, lightly stroking her back. "I'm not worthy of you, Ben," she choked back the words. I lifted her chin, looking deep into her eyes. "Of course you are," I said gently. "And if I need to prove it, I'll show you right now." And we spent the rest of the morning together, forgetting all the tension. Monica's tender gestures continued for another few months, but then something else changed. Jemima started coming over to the house less often. While Monica still saw her, Jemima avoided me, and she didn't show up for our regular hangouts anymore. I tried asking Jeff if anything was wrong, hoping he might share. Jeff chuckled softly when he heard that. "Ben, don't worry. Nothing's wrong with Jem. She's developing a new swimsuit line and work is taking up all her time. Trust me, she's not cheating on me." He confidently patted me on the shoulder and turned away, leaving me standing there, my mind still racing with all the secrets hidden under the surface of our relationships. When I brought it up with Monica, she just laughed it off, dismissing it. "Nothing, honey. She's just swamped with work," she said, her eyes gleaming with confidence. "I'm seeing Jemima in a few days, then I'll fill you in. Don't worry." But looking back, I was a fool. I didn't realize what was right in front of me. I assumed maybe Jemima was upset about something with Jeff, or maybe on her way out of the relationship. I had no real clue, but there were a lot of clues. Confirmation bias had clouded my judgment. Then Monica's mood changed. She became glum and depressed for a couple of weeks. Everything seemed darker, like a storm was coming. She was irritable, sad, and I kept asking what was going on. Monica would just hug me, bury her face in my chest, and quietly say, "It's just some silly thing with Jemima. Everything will be fine." Then, suddenly she announced that she and Jemima were going to a spa for the weekend, a getaway just outside New York. "When we get back, we'll have that long vacation we've been promising each other," she said, a fleeting smile like a breeze. I didn't suspect anything. But then, on Friday afternoon, I got a call from that spa. It was the call that started it all. Monica left her wallet here. The voice on the other end said, professional but unfamiliar. They said they'd called her phone, but no one answered, so they were calling me as next of kin. Next of kin. A spa calling a guest's next of kin. The name of the place was weird too. Staten Island Family Clinic. It didn't sound like any spa I'd ever heard of. When they refused to provide any more info over the phone, a couple of clicks on Google revealed everything. It was a family planning clinic, specializing in abortion services. No wonder Monica's phone had been off. She didn't want me to see her location, because we could both see each other's phone locations. The only question left was, who? Monica or Jemima? Based on Jemima's recent behavior, I figured it was her. Monica hated kids so much there was no way she'd be there for this. On Saturday morning, I got a call from Jemima's phone. "Hello, Jem. Is this Monica?" I asked, my voice full of suspicion. "Hi, Ben. It's me, Monica," she said, sounding like she was trying to keep her voice calm. "My phone died, it's not charging. I'm going to take it to the Apple store to get fixed." Damn. So Jemima's phone was working, and Monica's wasn't. That meant Jemima wasn't worried about being tracked, but Monica was. Things were getting even worse. "Yeah," I said, trying to stay composed. Thoughts were swirling in my head. I didn't know if I should confront Monica about what I knew or not. Would she lie to me? I even wondered, why was I doubting my wife like this? "Are you okay, Ben?" Monica asked after a long pause. "You're awfully quiet." "Monica," I said, taking a deep breath. "The family planning clinic called here. They said you left your wallet. Your phone was off, you obviously didn't want to be tracked. So, who was there, Monica? You or Jemima?" There was a long silence, so long that I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. Monica took a deep breath, then whispered, "I'm so sorry, Ben. and she hung up. While she didn't confirm anything, those words were enough. I was almost certain it was Monica. It fit everything, the clinginess, the long silences, and then the trip to New York. But if it wasn't my kid, whose was it? I tried calling both their numbers back, but no answer. Monica didn't pick up and Jemima didn't pick up either. Awesome. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I called Jeff, told him I needed to see him now. No waiting. We met at a local coffee shop, a place Jeff frequented without being bothered. When I got there, he was already sitting, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, looking like he was trying to avoid being recognized. When I sat down, I could see something in his eyes: hesitation, maybe guilt. He took off his glasses, set his coffee down, and looked straight at me. "Ben, before you react, just hear me out. This was never meant to happen," he started, his voice shaky. "What the hell?" I interrupted, my voice low and cold. Jeff looked around the coffee shop like he was afraid someone would hear. "Keep it down, Ben. We don't need to make things worse," he said, his voice tense. "I'm asking what the hell is going on," I said, leaning towards him, feeling the anger rising inside me. "It's not what it looks like, Ben. Listen," Jeff lowered his voice. "This wasn't something any of us wanted to happen." I slammed both my hands on the table, not caring about the stares coming my way. "It's your damn kid, isn't it?" I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "What did you do to my wife, huh?" Jeff held up his hands, signaling me to calm down, his eyes pleading. "It's not what you think, Ben. Please, just hear me out. I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" I roared, not caring who was watching. "You didn't mean to sleep with my wife? I don't play games with me, Jeff. The time and place may have been the first time you touched her, you bastard." "Ben, please calm down," Jeff pleaded. "We can't work this out here. There's a lot you don't know, you don't understand." I stared at him, my hands clenched, my heart racing. Everything was falling apart. The pieces of my life were crumbling. There was no putting it back together. I needed answers, and I wasn't leaving that coffee shop until I had the whole truth. I took a deep breath, snorted, and flung the still hot coffee straight into Jeff's face. Honestly, screw him and his fake apologies. I didn't need to hear another word. Why stop? To let him pour some more BS into my ear? At that point, reason had completely left the building. I felt like I was being stabbed in the back by the people I trusted most. Jeff and Monica, the people I believed in, the ones who betrayed me. If I had been calmer, if I'd listened more closely, maybe I'd have seen the absurdity. But I was consumed by rage, a choking anger, and nothing made sense anymore. Something still wasn't right, like a missing piece in the story. If it was Jeff's kid, why did Jemima go with Monica to that clinic? Wouldn't she be furious to find out? But those questions just flickered in my head, then quickly got buried. That rage needed an outlet, and Jeff was the one to take it. I stormed out of the coffee shop, stomping my feet so hard that others turned to look, trying to hold myself back from punching him in the face. A public altercation with a celebrity like Jeff would be a huge scandal. All I needed was some time to start a new chapter in my life. When you're fueled by anger, jealousy, and hurt, every decision becomes clouded. I drove home, my nerves stretched tight like guitar strings, and immediately started packing up all of Monica's things. No gentleness, I threw everything into boxes, bags, and the suitcases she left behind. She was using 2 suitcases on her trip, so there wasn't a ton of stuff. Everything was piled up in the garage. Her car was at the airport, and there wasn't any family nearby to drop the keys off with. The thought of taking it all to Jeff's apartment crossed my mind, but I brushed it off. He lived in a penthouse with a doorman. There was no way I'd get past him, and besides, seeing him again would only make me want to throw a few more punches. So, everything sitting in the garage was fine. I spent a few minutes changing all the electronic locks, deleting Monica's fingerprints from the system. It didn't take long. Done, I moved on to changing all the Wi-Fi passwords in electronic devices, in case she got the idea of coming back here again. Then, I did what everyone does when they need to regain control of their life. I set up a separate bank account, transferred some money, and changed all the passwords on my investment accounts. The prenuptial agreement spelled out exactly how much Monica was entitled to, and I made sure to leave the exact amount in the joint account, not a penny less. Enough for her to start over if she wanted to. The rest of the investments were all in my name from before Monica came into my life, so she wouldn't have any claim on them. And then I called the lawyer. The lawyer I usually worked with for company contracts was too close to Jeff, so I decided to use Yelp to find someone else. Surprisingly, I could meet with someone the next day. I was determined to get everything settled as quickly as possible. I wanted her to hurt. I wanted her to get a taste of the loss she had inflicted on me. After I finished everything, I slumped down, my mind tired and empty. The whole room felt eerily quiet, and I just sat there, thinking about the emptiness of it all. Thanks for watching part 1 of So, part of my therapy with Mevs. Crenshaw involved journaling. Love triangles, harsh truths, and secrets left untold. The story continues in part 2. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next episode. See you soon.